It started with 6 words from my daughter. "Daddy, Mommy kissed someone else today." Just like that. Flat, clean, without drama. We were sitting in the car, parked outside the ballet studio, her little hands fiddling with the ribbons on her shoes. I remember the way she said it. Like she was offering me a crayon drawing. Like it was just another thing that happened on a Tuesday. My first instinct was to laugh. I didn't She wasn't joking. She wasn't confused. She just blinked once and said it again. She kissed a man. He had glasses. He wasn't you. There's a stillness that happens inside a man when everything he trusts fractures at once. Not rage. Not panic. Just silence. Like a dropped glass midair, suspended before the shatter. I didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. My daughter didn't ask why. She looked back out the window like the world hadn't just changed. Maybe for her, it hadn't. Maybe it was always this fragile. That night, I didn't confront my wife. I watched her hum a tune while she rinsed dishes. Watched her pour herself a glass of red wine like nothing in the universe was wrong. Watched her ask our daughter how class went and smile when the answer was fun. I stared at her smile. Noticed, for the first time in months, how perfectly rehearsed it was. Like a mask that had become skin. I excused myself before I said something irreversible. Saturday alone in the garage for over an hour, engine off, staring at the concrete. I didn't sleep. At 2:18 a.m., I opened the Notes app on my phone and wrote, "When your own child becomes the mirror that shows you the truth, there's no turning away, only forward." At 3:07, I started a folder. I titled it Cleo's Eyes. My daughter's name, because in 6 words, she'd seen more clearly than I had in 6 years. The next morning, I walked Cleo to school. She skipped beside me like the world was simple. Before she went inside, she paused and asked, "Are you mad at Mommy?" I knelt down and shook my head. "Do you remember the man she kissed?" She nodded. He gave her a bracelet. What did he look like? She thought hard. Glasses, beard, big laugh. I kissed her on the forehead. "Thank you for telling me." And then I watched her disappear through the school doors. Carrying the truth like a secret only children can hold without judgment. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my brother, not even the therapist I stopped seeing 2 years ago. I needed to be sure. I needed evidence. Not for court. For myself. So I wouldn't let her talk her way around it. So I wouldn't fall for the practiced tears or the well-timed outrage. So I'd have something I could look at and say, "Number, you don't get to rewrite this." It took 2 weeks to find him. The man with glasses and a beard who laughed too loud. He wasn't hard to locate once I stopped pretending. Work emails, conference calls that didn't line up. Hotel receipts billed to our joint account under initials I didn't recognize. His name was Ethan, a consultant, divorced, no kids. But the worst part? She met him through my company, a client I introduced at a networking event. 3 years ago, I shook his hand, bought him a drink, invited him to dinner with my wife. They'd been friendly ever since. I found their photos, texts. One labeled, "Paris, our secret." I hadn't been to Paris, but apparently my wife had, twice. Once for a conference, once for self-care. She came back both times with a new perfume. I never asked who bought it. I never thought I needed to. At dinner that night, I looked across the table at her. She smiled, poured wine, talked about her friend's engagement. And for the first time, I smiled back. Not because I believed her, but because the part of me that needed to was finally dead. Her name is Claire. We met in college, third year, early fall, a 7:45 a.m. economics lecture where no one paid attention and everyone drank coffee like it could undo sleep deprivation. She wasn't loud. She didn't compete for attention. She had that subtle confidence, the kind that doesn't beg to be noticed but becomes impossible to forget once you do. I remember the way she took notes in perfect cursive, underlined every third heading in blue, and tilted her head when she listened. I remember thinking, she listens like she means it. And for a long time, I believed she did. We got married 5 years later. There was no dramatic proposal, no fireworks, no flash mob. Just a walk after dinner, under a low gray sky, and the two of us sitting on a park bench, talking about someday. She said she didn't want a big ring. She said she didn't care about the ceremony. She said, I just want a life that's real. I thought I was giving her one. Claire always had a plan. A 5-year track at her firm. 2 kids before 35. A mortgage, a joint retirement fund, summer trips with sunscreen and spreadsheets. She made life manageable, neat, and I made sure she never had to worry. She left her job when Cleo was born. Her choice. I supported it. She said she wanted to be there for the moments that matter. First steps, first words, the bedtime stories. And she was. At first. But then came the evening yoga classes, the weekend workshops, the out-of-town retreats for rebalancing and networking with like-minded women. I didn't question them, because questioning Claire always felt like doubting her, and doubting her felt like betrayal. That's the thing about slow changes. They don't come like thunder. They come like water erosion, quiet, persistent, impossible to see until the cliffside is gone. She stopped touching my shoulder in the kitchen, stopped falling asleep with her leg resting against mine, stopped asking me how my day was, started telling me how hers was instead. Small things, until they weren't. Cleo was born on a rainy Tuesday. Claire held my hand so tightly I lost circulation. She sobbed no makeup, hair matted to her forehead, and whispered, "She's ours. We made her." And in that moment, I believed nothing could ever take us apart. I was wrong. Because the things that take people apart don't always break the surface. They hide. In smiles that don't reach the eyes. In glances at phones that last a second too long. In the way someone says, "I'm fine," like punctuation, not reassurance. Claire said, "I'm fine" a lot. When Cleo turned 4, Claire took her to a private daycare 20 minutes away. "Better curriculum," she said. "More structure." I offered to do drop-off and pick-up, but she insisted. I like the drive. It gives us time. Now I wonder who else those drives gave her time with. I'm not stupid. But love dulls the knife. And I'd built a life around protecting Claire. Around making things easier, smoother, safer. She used to say I was her rock. I didn't know that meant she was planning to build another house without me. I remember the first time she left town for 3 days. Wellness retreat, she called it. Phone access limited. Digital detox. She came back glowing. New clothes, new energy, new lipstick I hadn't seen before. She kissed my cheek at the airport. Not my lips. I told myself she was tired. Or that she'd outgrown those kinds of gestures. That people change. That it didn't mean anything. That I was imagining things. But Cleo hadn't imagined it. She'd seen it. All of it. And when she told me about the kiss, the bracelet, the laugh, It was like a stranger had pulled back the curtain, and standing behind it wasn't my wife, just someone who wore her face. I started keeping track, not because I wanted to catch her, because I already had. What I wanted now was clarity, facts, patterns, proof not for a court but for the quiet moments when self-doubt tried to talk me out of what I already knew. Claire's phone was off limits. She never said that, but it was understood. She kept it face down during meals, took it with her into the bathroom, never left it charging unattended. She claimed she valued privacy, and I, being the trusting fool I once was, called that respecting boundaries. Now, I saw it for what it was. Control. I installed a camera in the garage, one in the foyer, a third hidden in the hallway facing the front door. Not to monitor her, to monitor the truth. I didn't review the footage every day. I didn't need to. Claire's life had become a series of coordinated escapes. She left the house dressed for errands and came back in gym wear. She bumped into friends she never invited over. And once, just once, I saw her return in a car that wasn't ours. A sleek black sedan, license plate blurred by rain. She slipped out, head down, coat collar high. But I knew that walk, that posture, that smile she wore when she thought no one could see her. The man appeared in the footage 4 times over 3 weeks. He never came inside. They always spoke at the car. No hugs, no touching, just conversation. Intimate, prolonged. The kind of talks we hadn't had in years. The kind where time dissolves and laughter fills the gaps. And always, always, before Claire walked back in, she'd pause by the side mirror, fix her hair, touch up her lipstick, put the mask back on. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because I knew Claire too well. She'd flip it. Say I was controlling, insecure, paranoid. And if I showed her what I'd seen, she'd cry. Not because she was sorry, because she'd been caught. And I didn't want a confession. I wanted a reckoning. Cleo started asking questions. Why does Mommy work on Sundays now? Why doesn't she eat dinner with us anymore? Why do you sleep on the couch sometimes? I told her the truth, in pieces small enough for a child to carry. Mommy is busy. Mommy needs time. But she saw through it. Kids do. They don't have the words, but they feel the weight. And Cleo felt it. In the silence. In the empty dinner plates. In the bedtime stories that never came. I found Ethan's Instagram by accident. Tagged in a photo by a friend of a friend. Nothing damning. A conference badge. A post about wellness leadership. A soft smile that made my stomach turn. But in the background of one image, Claire. Her back to the camera. But unmistakable. The navy coat. The red scarf. The way she leaned in when she laughed. She wasn't on a retreat that week. She wasn't meeting a client. She was in Miami. With him. And I was at home, teaching Cleo how to tie her shoes. The lie wasn't the worst part. It was the ease. The routine. The way Claire could look me in the eye and say, I missed you. Then go upstairs and text him from our bed. I knew she didn't love him. Not the way she used to love me. What she loved was the escape. The idea of herself as someone still wanted. Still mysterious. Still unfinished. And I had become the furniture in her story. Stable. Silent. Taken for granted. I started building a different kind of folder. One labeled Departure. It had 3 tabs. Custody. Financial separation. Truth. I met with a lawyer. Quietly. Told her I didn't want revenge. Just accuracy. A clean break. My dignity intact. My daughter protected. No mess. No scandal. Unless Claire forced it. Unless she tried to rewrite the narrative and paint herself as the victim, in which case I had everything ready. Names, dates, footage, even a journal in Claire's own handwriting. Yes, she still kept one. And no, she didn't hide it well. One night, while she showered, I read 2 entries. Sometimes I think I'm meant for more. Not just this house, this routine, this version of myself I never agreed to become. He sees me, not as a wife, not as a mother, as Claire, just Claire. I stopped reading. Not because it hurt, because it didn't. She was right. She was no longer the wife I knew, and I was no longer the man who needed her to be. The first step was disappearing. Not physically, emotionally, energetically. I became quieter, agreeable, predictable. Claire mistook it for fatigue, or worse, acceptance. She stopped watching me, which meant I could finally start watching her. I changed passwords discreetly, separated our finances strategically. Every paycheck began sliding into a different account, one she didn't know existed. I opened a P.O. box under a name I'd never used, registered a new email address. I wasn't running. I was building a new version of myself, one she wouldn't see coming. The man she left behind would look familiar, but only at first glance. I spoke to the school, asked questions. What would shared custody look like? What were the rules around pickup logistics, emergency contacts, travel authorization? No one asked why. No one needed to. Men don't usually prepare for these things. But when they do, they're not playing. I started therapy again. Not to cope, to sharpen. I told the therapist the truth, not for advice, but to hear myself say it out loud. She lied to me, over and over, and I still tucked her in with a kiss. He didn't say I deserved better. He said, "What are you going to do with that truth?" I said, "Build something better." And I meant it. Then came the surveillance. Yes, I know how that sounds. But let me be clear, I wasn't hunting for more betrayal. I already had enough. I was documenting patterns, timelines, proximity, not to humiliate her, to protect my daughter, because Claire wasn't leaving me. Not yet. She was waiting for something. I just didn't know what. I had my guess. Ethan. But Ethan had his own complications. An ex-wife, a pending custody dispute, a career built on clean reputation. He wasn't ready to go public. And Claire hated waiting. So I gave her something to lean on. I started staying late at work, turning off my phone for hours, letting her think I was distracted, bored, detached. She began texting Ethan more. I knew, because I installed a keystroke logger on our shared desktop. Cruel? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. When someone breaks the rules, you stop playing fair. Claire finally brought it up one night over dinner. "You've seemed distant lately." I shrugged. "Just tired." "You sure it's not something else?" I looked up, gave her a half smile. Would it matter if it was? She blinked. She wasn't ready for that version of me. Not the man who didn't beg. Not the one who didn't need her to explain. She changed the subject, and I knew I had her exactly where I needed her, balancing on the edge between suspicion and self-satisfaction. The next day, I dropped off Cleo early and accidentally forgot my phone at home. Claire found it. I knew she would. She went through it. I watched the security cam footage later that night. Her sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through messages that weren't there. Just vague hints. A screenshot from a hotel reservation website. A "thanks for last night" message from a coworker named Alicia, fabricated, time-stamped, preloaded. She took the bait. And for once, I watched her doubt herself. Watched her realize I could lie too. That night, she initiated sex for the first time in 6 months. I didn't stop her. I let her try to reclaim territory she thought she still owned. But the difference was, I wasn't giving her anything back. She was playing a game of possession. I was playing a game of extraction. Over the next 2 weeks, I fed her small doses of withdrawal. Canceled dinner plans. Forgot anniversary reminders. Let messages go unread for hours. She responded with sudden attention. Packed my lunch again. Sent "just thinking of you" texts in the middle of the day. Even suggested a family weekend trip. It wasn't guilt. It was fear. The fear of losing control. And the more she tried to hold on, the more I loosened the rope. Let her pull against empty air. I booked the lawyer officially. Served the preliminary notice. Didn't tell her. Not yet. Because this wasn't about the paperwork. This was about the moment. The final moment when she'd think everything was still fine. And I'd take it all back. My name. My peace. My daughter. Everything she thought was permanent. There's a skill in revenge that most people don't understand. It's not about destruction. It's about direction. You don't throw the fire. You light the fuse and walk away before it burns. Let them think they're safe. Let them believe the house is quiet until the smoke reaches the ceiling. And it's too late to run. Cleo's birthday was the kind of Saturday that looks perfect on the outside. Sunlight filtered through the curtains. Balloons floated lazily in the hallway. The smell of vanilla cake filled the house. Claire had gone all out: streamers, themed plates, even rented a bounce house. It was excessive. Loud. A distraction. But that's how Claire worked. She believed noise could replace substance. And for most of our marriage, it did. Not anymore. Ethan came. Of course he did. He arrived late, alone, wearing a casual button-down like this was just another backyard barbecue. No one else noticed anything. To everyone else, he was a friend. A+1. A man with a charming smile and soft hands. But I watched them closely. I watched how she smiled differently at him. Watched how he lingered a second too long when handing her a plate. Watched how Cleo stared quietly, intensely at both of them, processing things a child should never have to process. I made sure to greet him with warmth. Not fake, not forced, just patient. The kind of calm that unnerves people who expect chaos. After cake, Claire asked if I could help bring the gifts inside. I nodded. We went into the garage. She shut the door behind us. And for the first time in months, her voice dropped the performance. You're being distant. I raised an eyebrow. Because I didn't fight you over candle colors? Because you're pretending like nothing's wrong. I stayed quiet. She stepped closer. Are you seeing someone? I let that hang in the air. Then, if I were, would that change anything? She blinked. That was the moment her foundation cracked. She didn't cry, didn't rage. She just stood there, processing. I walked past her and said, "The guests are waiting." That night, after Cleo fell asleep and the last guest left, I pulled the envelope from my drawer. It was thick, heavy. Not from cash, from truth. Inside was a list of bank transfers she thought I didn't know about. Printouts of hotel bookings under her name. Screenshots of texts sanitized, simplified, stripped of emotion, but rich with implication. A short note, "You are free to leave, but not with everything." I placed it on her pillow, not in anger, in finality. She found it before bed. I heard the sharp inhale, the rustle of paper, the silence afterward. No yelling, no confrontation. Instead, she came downstairs in a robe, eyes wide, mouth tight. "You went through my stuff?" I didn't answer. She tried again. "This is illegal. You can't." "You're right," I said, cutting her off. "You should take it to court." The color drained from her face. She wasn't scared of the law. She was scared of exposure, of people seeing the polished version of her crack, of being the villain in a story she'd always controlled. She tried to negotiate. "Maybe we can fix this. Maybe we can just—" I shook my head. "Claire, I don't want revenge." She blinked, confused. "I want clarity." Then I handed her the second envelope. Custody papers. Nothing cruel. Joint custody. No alimony requests. Just a clean split. I could have gone for more. Taken everything. Proved infidelity. Humiliated her. But I didn't, because that wasn't the win. The win was her sitting there, realizing she'd lost me months ago, and never even noticed. She signed. Eventually. Not because she agreed. Because she realized I wasn't bluffing. And because Ethan wasn't going to save her. I had checked. He'd backed off. Blocked her. Pulled away. The second things became real. He was never leaving his family. She'd given up everything for a man who wouldn't claim her in daylight. And I was still standing. Not victorious. Just clean. Untouched. Clear. The next morning, Cleo handed me a card she'd made. Stick figures. Smiley faces. A big red heart in the middle. She whispered, "I'm glad you stayed for my party." I crouched down and said, "I'll always stay for your party." And I meant it. Because no matter what Claire did, she was never the story. Cleo was. And the only vow I still held sacred was the one I made the day she was born. Not to Claire, to our daughter, to protect her from becoming the kind of person her mother turned into. Claire moved out on a Thursday. It was raining, of course. Cliché, but fitting. She didn't cry. Didn't beg. Didn't scream. She just packed her designer luggage into the trunk of a friend's SUV, not Ethan's, and drove off like she was headed to a weekend retreat. I watched from the kitchen window. Cleo watched from the stairs. Neither of us waved. The house didn't feel empty. It felt honest. For the first time in years, I could hear the silence without wondering what it was hiding. No background lies humming through the walls. No tension folded into casual smiles. Just air. And space. Cleo came down after an hour and asked, "Is she coming back?" I said, "Not for a while." She nodded once. Then opened her coloring book and started drawing. That was it. No sobbing. No tantrums. Kids are resilient, yes. But more than that, Cleo had already started grieving before her mother ever left. All Claire did was make the absence official. I kept things simple. The routine stayed the same. Breakfast at 7, school by 8, bedtime stories even when I was exhausted. I didn't try to overcompensate. Didn't flood Cleo with gifts or promises. She didn't need a replacement parent. She needed consistency. So I became her anchor. Not perfect. Just present. That was enough. Claire's name still showed up on school documents. parent-teacher night invites, birthday reminders. But her responses were slow, sporadic. She didn't move far, but she moved on, or tried to. Photos with wine glasses and sunsets began appearing on her social media. Captions like "reclaiming my life" and "sometimes the bravest thing is letting go." I didn't like it. Didn't hate it either. I just observed. She was playing the part of the survivor in a script she'd rewritten to absolve herself. Let her. I wasn't interested in correcting her version anymore. I was too busy living mine. Then came the phone call. 3 months later. Claire's voice was thinner, unsure. "I heard about your promotion. Congratulations." "Thank you." Pause. "Cleo seems happy." "She is." Longer pause. "I thought maybe we could talk about maybe trying therapy. You and me. For co-parenting." I said, "We already are co-parenting. You take her every other weekend." "I meant," she trailed off, "maybe revisit things. Us." There it was. Not regret. Not love. Just emptiness. The realization that she'd traded certainty for freedom, and freedom came with a cost. I didn't gloat. I didn't sigh. I just said, "Claire, I'm not angry." She said, "I know. That's the part that scares you, isn't it?" Click. After that, she withdrew again. No more messages. No more late-night calls. Just quiet. Which I welcomed. The absence of chaos was its own kind of healing. I stopped checking her socials. Stopped replaying her words in my head. I had no appetite for the past anymore. I was too full of the present. Cleo asked one night, "Why don't you and Mommy talk?" I said, "Sometimes people stop being good for each other." Did she stop being good for you? I took a long breath. She stopped trying to be. Cleo didn't press further. She just leaned against me on the couch and said, "I'm glad you stayed." That made something twist inside me. Not pain, not pride, just peace. Work stabilized. Home stabilized. Even sleep returned. I stopped waking up with my heart racing, expecting confrontation. No more checking the clock at midnight, wondering where she was. No more analyzing every word for hidden meaning. I got my life back, bit by bit, quietly. Not in triumph, but in truth. And that was enough. One day, while cleaning out the garage, I found a box she left behind. Inside were letters I'd written her during our first year together. Printed photos. Ticket stubs. A necklace I'd saved up 2 months for. It all smelled faintly like lavender and dust. For a moment, I sat there. Just Saturday. Not mourning. Not regretting. Just acknowledging. This happened. We happened. And now, it was over. I closed the box and taped it shut. Labeled it, "No return." Then slid it onto a shelf I rarely opened. Some things don't belong in the trash. But they don't belong in the living room either. Spring came quietly that year. No loud celebrations. No parties. Just open windows, warm sunlight on the hardwood floor, and the smell of fresh coffee. Cleo was in the backyard, barefoot in the grass, reading out loud to her stuffed animals. I watched her from the kitchen, letting the quiet settle into my bones. This was the life Claire said she didn't want. Too ordinary. Too slow. She once told me she was drowning in predictability. Funny. I found peace where she found suffocation. 6 months had passed since the papers were finalized. Claire saw Cleo every other weekend. Sometimes she was late. Sometimes she canceled. always with a different excuse. Cleo didn't ask anymore. She adapted faster than I expected, stronger than I gave her credit for. Children have a way of surviving grown-up failures. They turn wounds into wisdom far quicker than adults. One afternoon, Cleo asked, "Do you think Mommy loves me?" I looked her in the eye and said, "Yes," because she needed to hear it. Even if I wasn't sure anymore. Claire had become a ghost in our story, still technically there but fading. She posted photos with new people, went on retreats, captioned things like, "Healing is messy but beautiful." Maybe it was. Maybe she was finally becoming someone honest. But I wasn't watching anymore. Not because I forgave her, because I stopped needing to. Her choices weren't my business. Only mine were. And mine had become simple. Cook dinner. Do laundry. Be present. Not heroic, just reliable. I did take one risk, though. After months of silence, I agreed to meet someone for coffee. Not a setup, no apps. Just a conversation with a woman I met at Cleo's school. She wasn't dramatic. She didn't flirt loudly or laugh too much. She listened. And when I spoke, she didn't try to fix me. She just let me exist. That was enough. We talked for hours. I didn't tell her about Claire. Not the full version. I didn't want to bring a ghost into something new. One night, Cleo found an old photo of Claire and me. She studied it for a long time before saying, "You looked happy." I nodded. We were, once. She asked, "Will you ever be happy like that again?" I thought for a while, then answered, "Maybe not like that, but something better." She smiled. "Like now?" I smiled back. Exactly like now. And for the first time, I realized I meant it. Not as a hope, as a truth. Revenge stories usually end with a bang. A moment of exposure, public humiliation, tears, screams, apologies. But real life, real revenge? It's quieter. It's the absence of needing anyone to lose, just so you can win. It's waking up in the morning and feeling no weight in your chest. No questions. No regrets. No what-ifs. Just stillness. I saw Claire once, unexpectedly, at a bookstore, of all places. She didn't notice me at first. She was standing in the self-help section, flipping through a book about emotional resilience. Her hair was shorter. She looked tired, not broken, not thriving, just in between. She turned and spotted me. We both froze. I gave her a polite nod. She smiled faintly, then looked down. We didn't speak, and it was perfect, because there was nothing left to say. Nothing worth undoing the silence I had earned. When I left the store, the sun was starting to set. A gold line split the sky open, warm and quiet. I got in my car, turned the key, and didn't think about her again. Not with bitterness, not with nostalgia, just nothing. And that, finally, was freedom. Later that night, Cleo crawled into bed beside me. She whispered, "I love you, Daddy." I wrapped my arms around her and whispered back, "I love you more than all the stars." She fell asleep within seconds, and I lay there in the dark, holding the only thing that ever truly mattered. She had seen her mother first. She had seen the lies. She had seen the cracks. But she also saw me, standing, staying, becoming something her mother chose not to. And I knew that was the legacy I'd leave behind. Not a marriage. Not a mistake. But a promise kept.